Hey, nice to meet you. Sure. Are you talking about the iOS app or Open APIs? Here, no.
Right.
So you want to run it on your computer instead of on a bridge?
No, I was going to run it on a Alasdair environment because I generally have my own Alasdair environment running anyhow, so I might as well.
But what would you use to run, like, what would you use to make it awesome? Like, what kind of running would you function with TI stick with your computer?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bitbucket actually did that for a long time. So that's
Okay, cool.
possible. We don't make docs for it, but if you're already comfortable running in a virtual environment, it should be pretty easy for you to set up code. It's set up in a Linux.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's, yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting the TI stick.
You're right. It's a little, it's really weird because like, I'm very familiar with all of the technological concepts and it's like that I've done before, not related to diabetes.
Yeah.
And yet when it comes to your body, it's like, you know?
Yeah, but the cool thing is there's a lot of steps in there, so you can kind of basically get comfort with what you're doing. I will warn you, people who are technical tend to have a harder time than non-technical because you get so wrapped up in
Looking under the hood.
looking under the hood and saying this should be different, let me fix it now. So what I would say to you is you're already complexifying it by putting it in a different setup, like you're not running it on a rig. So I would focus on just setting it up and observing it, even if you don't let it like change things on your prompt. Use that and then go back under the hood and fix all the things first. Otherwise, you're going to get down such a rapid path that we're not going to be able to help you because you're going to be down this like really side rapid path. And we're like, yeah, but like you need to come back up to the main thread so that we can help you and then go on with customize. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I get the trunk.
Yeah.
I use the trunk. The trunk is my friend.
Yes. Yeah. And then also, my personal experience is most people kind of get into seeing it operate is better to help them understand the code and then figure out what they want to go customize. If you just look for raw code, you're like, what am I in terms of Bazel versus the AutoSynth file? Is it really
Yeah, that's it. Because I was looking at code and the code like I was like tracing the parameters, it's getting a little bit more complex than it used to be, and
yes.
yeah.
So yeah, that's why my personal thing is to say, get it right, so you can just watch it, and then it helps you trace the files and understand when the core files are being used, and therefore how to customize.
Just about managing.
That's driven.
Yeah, but then you can do whatever you want. I'm just saying when you come online, if you have something set up, it's easier for others to help you.
Yeah, it will make it easier for to communicate about potentially shooting.
Yeah.
If I don't have enough time to it's maybe a version that's not quite there.
Right, and you shouldn't have to do that. But what I would say is when you come in and ask questions like in therapy, like, hey, I'm running in a virtual environment with a TI stick. And you ask a question, you just come in and ask a question, we're going to respond as if you're running on a rig. So always say, like, here's my custom setup, and here's what I'm doing. I'm on the main path. I haven't customized yet, but just so you know. That way, if there's something that's weird or breaks because of the code setup, we'll be able to more easily spot, here's a normal bug that everybody gets and you're running into, here's a solution versus that might be environment specific.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is anything, but if it is, it's
like it could be because no one's tested it, right? Like because it's my only one.
Right. But again, I don't think you
Oh, actually. Okay. Like to learn more about you.
Kevin's first and I go second.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I don't know, I think it's the opposite. I think you achieve maximum results. They're not, so you don't think that they get better than someone who's doing but could do tweaks. If you do that, then it's not much. So you don't get the biggest results. Yeah.
You're fine. That is really nice. Go that way. Yeah. Well, you know I club so well.
Try to Yeah, not bad, mate.
So the
Very much really.
I have mine. I'm green. It is green.
That's good.
I have loads. I have loads.
Yeah.
At Tuesday. What did you have to beat on that Tuesday? Not the back, it's quite good. Tuesday, the 27th. Yeah.
But you just make the shit up. Just make shit up.
But use the actually you have to be different pens just make sure it's the same pen. By two you won't then I can tell you what I think is better.
They've got three.
So no wonderful nobody knows mine
From Liverpool.
just get used to it. I'm surrounded by people.
The idea is the other ones is like
It's always exactly the case. If you're on a support group, normally, the more than a front group is it represents a certain group.
It's not representative of their position.
And it's,
Just a way of approaching those different
Did you
topics.
notice there was no coffee?
Oh,
Oh no!
although I just had to ask.
Go, go.
Back to you. I was like, oh,
That's a sample.
It's not by George Michael. You wouldn't be interested.
You've seen what's happening in the world. Anybody would just
That's what extremes idea of extreme is people thinking they can do everything.
You see, first patient's got dementia. Next one, next one's got
It's not even a minority, it's distinct. 1 in 500, 700 GPs, that's ridiculous. In a different way. I've realized that's remarkable. We're doing a rental in some nonsense that forget about the experience. That should come naturally to me, it doesn't. Because of it's really, really nice.
The last one I didn't we didn't know that until we started doing it.
Oh, it's all right.
It's all running, isn't it?
Better than exciting characters, so I have to move it slightly.
Volunteer.
So I'm doing the pattern. So we've got the data. So I've got them coming to give that demo to me in the hospital in March. So yeah, so it's mostly I've decided that I'll go with it. Yeah, because it's waterproof.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, exactly. And also I don't have to, with the gosh, if they were going to use it as a non-pump, they have to use the purpose material. Yeah, you can't manually input PG until it's calculated. That's a deal breaker for me. Yeah, so it's small shit big. So it's small, but I get them to enter my desk and the should be able to do that. Yeah, but you can put in any PG ones, or it'll something through the lights. But what I don't want to do is everything.
Welcome back. Back on time. Excellent. Well done. Ish. So hope you managed to gather some food. If not, well. So I think this is going to be one of the highlight sessions, and pretty much wrapped around which the whole day is created. So you've had the prelude, a bit of from the companies, from the charities, you've heard about the research. So this one is the more fun bit, and I was going to just hand over to Tim, who's known as, those of you who don't know him, Tim's Pants on Twitter, or Tim Street, as he's known in real life. But I'll just take one moment just to say, before I'm sure he'll introduce her as well, it is a particular pleasure to get Dana all the way from Seattle to come around and talk to us a little bit. I'm not going to take away any of our thunder, but all I can tell you is that yesterday she went to the best part of England, Portsmouth. Sunny it was too, by the sea, absolutely. And we met her as a team, lots of nurse specialists, all of our consultant colleagues, research, trainees, and we are still talking about it today, and we all loved what she said, and she had lots of questions as well. So I'll just leave it there, and Tim, all yours now.
So good afternoon, everybody, and as Harvard has just introduced, we are now heading into the We Are Not Waiting portion of the day. So we've got 6 of us here all going to be talking about different aspects of what goes on in this part of our world. We're going to start off with Kev, who's going to talk to you about Night Scouts and the We Are Not Waiting community before we move into some of the other aspects of this. As similar to this morning, we're going to run through the presentations and there'll be Q&A at the end of it. So if you've got any questions, keep hold of them and then fire away when we get to the end. So with no further ado, over to Kev.
Okay, hi everybody. One part of the session really is to talk to anybody who hasn't really used Night Scout. Although looking at the audience here, I seem to recognise half of you, so I guess that you're pretty much, some of you have already used it. But the idea really is to set the scene, to show some screenshots, and then maybe with everything that the proper presenters are actually going to do, they'll all sink in. So Night Scout then. But before we start, just introduce myself. It might look like I'm a professional surfer, but actually my Twitter name there sort of tells otherwise, really. Everything I do is a diabetes dad, which I'm quite proud of. It's my daughter Amy. She's 17 now. She was diagnosed at 10. Been using the same animal pump for 4 years, 9 months. Maybe when the healthcare professionals decide that it's her choice for the next pump, we'll actually move forward. Okay, so Nightscale then, and CGM in the cloud. It's all about getting CGM in the cloud, and it's born out of a parent wanting to see their child's glucose values. It's a DIY thing. If you ask any of us up here to build it for you, you'll get a resounding no. We will not do it for you. But as you can see at the bottom, with global support, it's around the world. It's pretty much 24/7. There are so many people to help you get where you want to be, if that's where you want to be. So we do it under the WeAreNotWaiting banner. And really, what that's about is that we want our children to be safe and happy, and pretty much we know how to do it. So we pretty much should do this. You know, if we can do something to make our child's lives a bit easier, we will do that. Obviously, WeAreNotWaiting is a bit more than that now as well, because it's all about adults as well. So, but pretty much the same message is true. So a brief timeline then. Our focus on John Costick and his son Evan. There were so many people behind the scenes. It's probably unfair to just focus on one, but their story is quite good. Evan was diagnosed, so in 2012, we look at the timeline then, it seems like a long time ago now. But within a few months, Evan got the Dexcom G4. John looked at it and thought, what's this USB port at the end of this thing? I wonder what it's for. I'll look and get some data out of this if I write a program on my PC, which he did within 3 days, which as a programmer myself, I think just even defining what I want to do in 3 days is quite amazing. So within a few months, straight after that, he wrote the same sort of program on an Android phone. As you can see in the middle there, it's plugged into a Dexcom receiver. From that point, data could get to the internet. Data was uploadable to the internet. A few months later, John was using a new startup watch, a smartwatch, called a Pebble. I dare say a few of us got these in the room. The Pebble was quite a new startup, and it was one of the things that we could program. So John actually wrote a program to download that data and to help many other people, and he got the glucose values on his watch. So immediately that closed the loop there of, I shouldn't use the word loop. We got to the point of what we wanted to do, or what he wanted to do at that point, which was to see his child's glucose values on his wrist. So whilst this was happening, a few people, I think the sounding 7 sort of founding members, were sort of saying, well, really, you know, in the interest of paying it forward, we should actually do something about this, so other people can actually learn about this, and we don't just keep it to ourselves. And so, as part of that, they decided to create this CGM in the cloud group, which I dare say a few of you have been on. The idea was that actually maybe 50 families might be interested. So where we are today, although Tim already told you how many people were in the group, 25,500 people are in that group now. I did these slides on Wednesday, that number's already gone up by a few hundred. And it's spawned 30 different country groups where we talk about the different locale specific information such as networks and 4G contacts, etc. Nightscale UK has a group, and there was 2,100 members. Again, that number's gone up since Wednesday. There's many different ways to get your CGM in the cloud. Most of the Dexcom, the Medtronics, they're all covered. The Libre is covered, it is covered as well, although strictly perhaps not within the Nightscale arena, or within the WeAreNotWaiting arena. But there are multiple solutions to get your Libre turned into a CGM. Sorry, Albert. So the key thing was really about getting this view of a website of actual CGM information. What we can see in the middle there is a trace. Most of you recognise that as being a trace is actually quite normal, not some of the flat lines that you only see posted on the so what we can see straight away at the top there is the 7.7. That's one of my daughter's graphs. We see the trace in the middle, and down the bottom is a 2-day trace. That 2-day trace is quite useful, I find, for just spotting just slight patterns. We've got some more information. If we just zoom in, at the top there we see the blue line, that's the basal rate, and we can see a couple of TBRs that my daughter's done. My daughter's 17 now, so I don't really have very much control, or any control, over the management of what she does on a day-to-day basis, and that is totally the way that I want it. I want her to do it all, but I want to sort of be able to see when there's a problem, to be alerted when there's a problem. So what we can see there is she took 32 grams worth of carbs, 4.1 units of insulin. Interestingly, the colour there used for insulin is blue, so because that actually turned out to be just water that she was taking. But look at that graph. Some information also quite useful is to know some of the things, no calves on board in this particular point in time. I'll skip past the BWP onto the cage. The cage is the cannula age, so probably should be, that's good for a few more hours. The sensor age is the next one, and of course it's a Dexcom sensor, so we'll be changing that in 22 hours time. Because everybody does that, don't they? It don't make sense. The basal 1.65U. Going back to the BWP, that is the bonus with a preview. That's actually quite a handy thing. Might be scary to some healthcare professionals because that's telling us to get in range, 0.4 units will get into the range that we've defined. The key thing about that for me is at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm bleary-eyed and I get an alarm and I go in and I think, what do I need to do? I know I trust this algorithm, therefore I can trust that. It's a lot better than getting a decimal place in the wrong place and giving the wrong amount of insulin. So it's good to see it on the website, much better to see it on the phone. And this is where the interesting part of all Nightscout was about getting CGM in the cloud. To run this extra app on the phone, you don't actually need any cloud-based stuff at all. So a lot of adults now, I see a few of you in the audience that are already using Xtrip to get information to your own phone as an adult, as opposed to having anybody looking at it from afar. So it's good to see it on the phone. Even better if you're in a location like this to be looking at your watch. That's 15-year-old Jack who is currently skiing, as it turns out. That's a photo from Wednesday. And a photo from last year, Jack again. And this is him skiing, looking at his watch to make sure everything's going okay. If you don't like that watch face, there are many different watch faces for the Pebbles. There are also many different watches. And actually, if you've got a new smartwatch and somebody hasn't created a watch face for it, either you could probably do that, or somebody else will probably do it as soon as you mention it. So it's all about Amy for me. And Amy doesn't really wake up to her Animax 5 when it alerts. She just doesn't wake up at all. Many stories about that. So she always found it very, very difficult to go to sleep because she knew potentially she might have a hypo. So actually it gives her a safety net she feels that she knows that I will get alarms if anything goes drastically wrong. I prefer not to be woken up, but you know, I'm pleased to be woken up if it's going to save her. She doesn't think it's being monitored. I've heard it so many times by healthcare professionals talking about adults monitoring their children. Her phone's there, I didn't put those in. She doesn't feel like it's been monitored. What it does is actually provides like a mechanism for us to actually have an open conversation about things. And so it just makes things so much easier. Nightscout means starting her day in range, and it was no more important than when she did her GCSEs. And every morning I would set an alarm at 5:30, depending on when she needed to get up. I'd roll over, woke up, yeah, everything's all right. By the way, she's 8.9 now. So that's good. Did a presentation once and she was like 15 or something. That's good. Yeah, so I would wake up and I'd make sure she was okay. Most of the time she was, obviously, and I'd just go roll back to sleep. The key thing for me is as soon as I touch my feet on the floor and get out of bed, I'm awake for the day, and that can then sort of change my work for the day. So school is easier with the Pebble. There's a lot of kids who like identifying kids who are different to them. So if there's kids getting stuff out of their pockets, like even a phone to check it out, to see what their glucose values are, or a DEX receiver, things are a bit different. If a child can look at their Pebble, nobody knows that they're looking at anything other than a watch. The irony there is that whenever I look at my Pebble to look at the time, I never actually look at the time. So that's the glucose value. Okay, so I'm going to put it out to the community and ask them for how does it change their life. A lot of people would say they give their child more freedom. The adults would say they themselves more sleep, and that more sleep leads to lower anxiety because they're not so tired, they're not worried about so much. Some people have even, a lot of parents actually quit work as soon as their child is diagnosed because they just can't cope with everything going on. So with this, lower anxiety has meant that some people can return to work full time. For me, it's about a conversation changer. When I get home from work and Amy's there, and I can say to her, well, Amy, how was your day? And what I actually mean is, Amy, how was your day? What I don't mean is, Amy, what's your glucose levels? Because actually she knows, and I know, that I can find that information if I wanted to. But the key thing, and I'll finish with this one, is really this quote here. The couple have never been on a date night. So the couple have never been on a date night since the diagnosis of their child. By having Nightscout, they felt confident enough just to go into a pub. They did assure me that it was a childminder they're actually looking after their child. That's a good thing. But for me, it's important that sort of parents can get a nights out, and actually these people have found that by using Nightscout. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kev. So now we move on to Dana, who's going to come up here and talk to you about OpenAPS and a lot more.
I know the audio was a little bit weak. Hopefully, is it better now with this microphone? Great. Is somebody going to switch the slides? Next slide. Not quite. Well, I'll get started because my first couple of slides don't really need an explanation. The first thing I really want to talk about before we start talking about the technology is acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is this. Diabetes is hard. It's really, really hard. No matter what technology you have, you still have type 1 diabetes. And there's so many things that go into impacting our blood sugar that I don't think people talk about. It doesn't matter if you're super educated, if you're super privileged, you can access all the education, all the healthcare that you want around the world. It's still really, really hard because the reality is, thank you very much. The reality is there's a lot of things that go into our blood sugar that we can't actually measure. Who can measure the adrenaline spike of coming up on stage and talking to people? How's that going to impact your blood sugar? Some people go high, some people go low. Same with exercise. We're told to be active, be healthy, right? Take care of our diabetes, do exercise, but some exercise makes your blood sugar go up, some exercise makes your blood sugar go down. We can somewhat count food, we can measure insulin, but the reality is we're always playing catch up. We are always reacting to what's going on, and that's why these lines are always so up and down, is because we're constantly chasing, and it's really, really frustrating. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for almost 15 years now, and I have to say that it's easier, but it's still hard. It's not gone away, even with technology. And a lot of my frustration has to do with the tools that I've been handed. As a person with diabetes, I'm constantly, even today, said, what are you complaining about? You have access to insulin. Very true. Not everybody can afford or access insulin. That's a huge problem. But I also have an insulin pump and a CGM. So why are you complaining again? Well, the reason I complain is because I felt like my life was at risk. The reality is I am the world's best sleeper. I out-top all of y'all. I can sleep through anything, including the alarms on my CGM. So the CGM could be alarming on my bedside, rattle off the table onto the floor, and I would still sleep through it. And it was incredibly frustrating because after I graduated from college or university, I moved all the way across the United States to live by myself and to work. And that was great, except for I had a fear of dying in my sleep. Many of you with type 1, I see some head nodding that you know that feeling, but for people with type 1, it's really hard to describe the difference between going to sleep and fearing for your life and just going to sleep. It's a really hard feeling to describe. It was really, really frustrating. And I asked a lot of the manufacturers because as a patient, what can I do as a patient? Well, the reality is I can't do much as a patient other than, share my feedback and hope the companies are listening. And my responses from the company ranged from, well, it's loud enough for most people, which I didn't like to hear, or maybe you should get a roommate, which I didn't want to do. So I was just really, really incredibly frustrated, and I felt like, well, okay, I've shared my feedback, they're listening, and I was also told, yes, it's 5 years away, it's in our next product release. Let me tell you how long from diagnosis to literally last week it took for a CGM manufacturer to announce the ability to customize some alarms on the traditional device. So I was, and still am, very, very frustrated by technology, and the fact that these devices are not interoperable. On my first date with my now husband, the first question he asked me about my diabetes was, A, why are you wearing a pager? And B, the second question was, wait, why do you have two separate devices? And why does the data from device A not go to device B? And why doesn't device B control device A? Well, the reality was that just didn't work. So I found that there's one cure to waking me up at night. It is a 4-year-old, my beautiful niece. I was visiting last week, and I heard bang, bang, bang on the door. Aunt Dana, I know you're in there. Wake up. Aunt Dana, I know you're in there. Come play. So until device manufacturers are going to be able to reproduce my 4-year-old niece banging on the door for 30 minutes and me not waking up, we kind of feel powerless as patients, as people with diabetes, and that can be really, really frustrating because, again, it's really hard for medical device manufacturers to replicate that. So what can we do other than wait? And again, even as somebody with a lot of education and access and privilege, I want to repeat, diabetes is hard. If you feel like you are not matching the flat lines that other people have, you are not alone. People with diabetes all have hard days. You have a series of hard days. You have hard patches. When my doctor asked me to bring my data in, it was a week, obviously, where I knew he'd be looking at my data. I was going to try very, very hard. This is what my week looked like. This was before closed looping, but But this was the reality. The other thing that this picture illustrates is how I had access to my data as a person with diabetes in 2013. The FDA-approved software for my medical device was on a PC. I had a Mac. So I couldn't access my data retrospectively, let alone real time. And that's where social media comes into play. I think Kev already mentioned John Kostick, who had figured out how to reverse engineer the CGM software. I saw that on social media, on Twitter, and I was like, ooh, if only I could get my data off of my medical device, crazy concept, I could send that data to my phone and make a louder alarm. If the companies won't do it, maybe I can do it for myself. And that's actually what we were able to do. John was kind enough to share his code, and we were able to build my first system that we jokingly thought was so cool. We called it DIYPS, the do-it-yourself pancreas system, because it did everything I didn't want to, allowing me to sleep. It would look at the data for my CGM every 5 minutes, and if I was going low or going high, it would alarm me. And I was able to use all kinds of alarms on my phone, make different sounds, change them periodically, and it worked really great. Within the first week, this system alarmed and woke me up. But within that same week, I also managed to sleep through the alarms, because it's not just the volume, it's the alert fatigue we people with diabetes get. A couple of us have been twitching all day because everybody's pumps keeps vibrating and buzzing, and you're like, okay, is it me? Is it not me? So we get alert fatigue from all of that, and that's something that's not really recognized by the industry. We don't have a lot of solutions for that. So I slept through it, but we also built in remote monitoring capabilities. This was before Night Scout actually came to be, and I was able to send alarms to my then boyfriend who lived 20 miles away. He was able to get the alarm and say, hey, she's been under 60 for 20 minutes, she's not doing anything. Let me pick up the phone and call her and check on her. And he was, and that was able to wake me up, and obviously I'm alive here today. But the other thing we did with the system is not just CGM data, but we added buttons so that I would snooze the alarm so it wouldn't wake everybody else up. However, aside from being the world's best trained guinea pig, every time I did something, I pressed the button and say, don't wake anybody else up. But we added specific buttons so I could tell it, am I taking insulin? Am I eating carbs? What is going on? And because we had that data, we realized we could map all of that. Real-time food data, real-time insulin data, real-time CGM data. We actually built a forecast in the future that said, not only here's what your blood sugar is right now, but here's what your blood sugar will be into the future. And that was beautiful because it allowed me to go from being reactive, you're low, right now, take action, to, hey, in 72 minutes, you're gonna dip down to 72. You might wanna take action. Or hey, in 78 minutes, you're going to be 188. You're gonna be 9. Sorry, my translation numbers don't work that well. But you're going to be high, you might wanna take action. If you do something now, you won't have to be distracted later from what you want. And this was so amazing. And I used this open loop system. Didn't realize it was an open loop. I just thought it was smart alarms, predictive alarms, this great algorithm. But through working with other people in the community, one of the other unsung heroes in this community is Ben West. He had spent years figuring out, how do I understand and learn to trust my insulin pump? And he actually spent years figuring out how to communicate with the pump. So as Scott and I, my husband, began to talk in the community about, here's this thing that we created. It's really helpful for me. I think it's life-changing for me. I'm going to share it with other people. We got to know Ben, and a light bulb went off less than a year later, and we thought, we have this great algorithm that can basically do everything, and it wakes me up and tells me to do something. But instead of waking me up, why don't we just tell the pump what to do? And tell the pump to give me more insulin or less insulin to ward off the lows and the highs? Could we do that? And the answer was yes. If you take the same pump and CGM that I had, and you add a small computer, a battery to power it, and a radio stick, you too can close a loop and have a DIY closed loop artificial pancreas. It actually wasn't that hard. And so this is the rig I have today. You can see my pump and CGM in the rig. Here it is on me right now. And a lot of times people don't even notice that I'm wearing it. I've been asked if my phone battery, in fact, was my artificial pancreas, because people don't know what to expect when you say artificial pancreas or DIY closed loop. I've also got on the right side a picture of one of my Night Scout graphs, just so you can see some of the visuals of what I can see. I can see them on my phone, I can see them on my watch, I can see them now on a new rig. My loved ones can see it from afar, even though the fact that I'm traveling doesn't matter, they're able to see my data. And so if I want to ask for help or I need help, I'm able to get it. And this technology is great. It's not very, very complicated, but what it does is it makes decisions every 5 minutes based on what you've been eating, what your insulin has been dosing, what your blood sugar is, and what the trends predict it's going to be. It responds very, very precisely. It makes very conservative decisions every 5 minutes. So the magnitude of error on us as humans when we do a meal bolus, for example, especially for a big, large carb meal, it's really, really high because we're dosing many, in some cases, a dozen units of insulin. So it's very easy to be off and for that to go wrong. With a computer, you can say every 5 minutes, do very conservative. So even if you fall off a cliff, or your blood sugar shoots off like a rocket ship, or you walk out of range, or your CGM goes question mark, or the sensor falls out, or your kid rips it out. It doesn't matter what happens. It's able to give conservative dosing to do the right thing, and it's going to respond faster than a person would. And it doesn't go to sleep. So we humans can actually sleep. And this is just a contrast. I showed you some of my before pictures of before I was closing the loop. This was from the first week after I closed the loop and what it looked like every morning to wake up. I got an email yesterday from somebody who said, hey, I wanted you to know I just closed the loop. I had very low expectations, but I can't even tell you what it feels like to wake up every morning with a flat line and that feeling of knowing that everything was fine. I said, well, actually, I do understand because I feel that every morning too. When I flew over here, I landed on Thursday. I didn't sleep on the plane, and I stayed up all day. So by the time I went to sleep, I had been awake for 29 hours. And so you can imagine I slept very hard and very long Thursday night. I was out for about 12 hours. And I was able to go to sleep without a worry, without a fear in my mind about anything diabetes related. And I woke up in the morning, and I posted a picture on Twitter and said, this is what it's like to have peace of mind, to be able to go to sleep and not worry that I'm going to die, and not worry my family and worry my loved ones. That's pretty much priceless. And I have to say, people hear algorithm, and if you're not a computer programmer or engineer, that can be a scary concept, or you think it's something I can possibly understand. Well, I have to tell you, there's a common misconception that I'm an engineer or a programmer by trade. I'm not. I have a degree in public relations and political science. So I can confidently say that code is not rocket science. It is the same math that every person in this room with type 1 diabetes does. It's if this, then that. If my blood sugar is going to be high, I need more insulin. If my blood sugar is going to be low, I need less insulin. And then it just tells the pump what to do. And it breaks that out across 5-minute intervals. So it can give very, very small commands that add up over time. And that's why we created OpenAPS, because I built the system for myself at first. But I've been helped by John, I've been helped by Ben, and by Scott. And I knew that if it was this life-changing for me, I couldn't keep it to myself. I had to share it. And so that's why we launched the OpenAPS movement and called it OpenAPS to emphasize open source artificial pancreas system. We wanted to do everything we could to make this technology widely available. There's a lot of benefits of it because we didn't have to go through traditional clinical trials. We're not a company, nobody's paid for it. It looks low cost in comparison, but the flip side is you have to build it yourself if you want one. Now, that means that you have to spend your time figuring out how to build it, and you have to do it yourself. So there is time cost and opportunity cost of you doing it. But we also published our reference design. It's not just code and good luck, go build yourself a thing. We put together a reference design that explains all the safety thinking that we in the community have thought of over time. We answer all the common questions about what does happen if you lose CGM data, if you walk out of range, all these things that go on that people need to know about. And so if you want to check it out, everything is open source, including the code and the documentation. So right now you can go up and read artificial pancreas code. You can also see it on my shirt. It's printed on my shirt. The same code that's running on my rig. But all of the code, all of the documentation is open source, which means that people have and do contribute to it. If you see a typo, you know the see something, say something mantra of security. You see something, fix it. You get to put in a pull request, you get to put in an edit and fix the typo, or say, hey, I really wish the documentation was better around topic X. Guess what? It's all our responsibility and all our opportunity to actually fix things and make it better. And that's why the documentation, the code, everything of this has significantly improved over time. And the beauty of these systems is you're not just given a black box. You build a system and you have ultimate transparency at every step of every stage. Even if you started looping today, you can go into GitHub and trace back every line of code, every idea that the community has come up with, and see when did this feature come to be? How has it been tested? Who had any concerns or any testing bug reports, things like that? You can see everything. And that transparency is amazing because we as people with diabetes, we are the first and most caring about safety. You wouldn't use something that you didn't trust, that you didn't learn to trust. And learning to trust when we talk about technology is absolutely huge. And I think open source has a huge opportunity for showing us every detail. You may not want to read every detail at first, but over time, if you wanted to, you have the ability to dig in and see everything, which I think is absolutely significant. Because when you ask the question, okay, who's approving this? Who told you to do this? Who regulated this? Well, right now, it's not approved or regulated in any country. But that's no different than our review as people with diabetes of commercial devices. You're given a black box and told it can do something. You have to test and validate it because our lives depend on it. That's what's rooted in the work that everybody in this community does. It's our lives at stake. And it's not just me. Can I have everybody here who's looping or interested in looping raise your hands? Quite a few people, and I know there's a lot online. Thank you. There are about 576 plus individuals worldwide who have chosen to do some form of DIY closed loop technology. No, that's not a lot if you look at the percentage of the millions of people in Type 1. However, when you think about the time it takes to build these systems, to learn to trust them, I think it's significant. Also, because the question about research and data, this community probably has over 3 million hours of experience. 3 million hours of data that traditional researchers and traditional companies are ignoring. It's a waste. So one of the things that I'm also working on, and Tim will also speak to, is the fact that, again, we're not waiting. If the companies won't use this data for good, we're going to do our own research studies. We're going to focus on the things that we care about, and we're going to study it and roll it out to the community so we can be helped now and not wait 7 years for somebody to decide that they finally want to do research on the things that we as a community care about. And I also want to illustrate some of the faces of the community. Obviously, there's a diverse audience here. There's a diverse audience, or a diverse group worldwide who are looping. These are parents. These are kids. I know we have kids as young as 1 and 2 years old who have ended up have their parents build themselves closed loop systems. There's teens, there's adults, there's people of all ages and all experiences. You don't have to have a technical background or even a PR degree in order to be able to build these systems. And I want to highlight specifically how significant it is to have people from the community contribute to projects like this. My first rig looked like this. And if you added up all the batteries and the meter and the CGM and everything that I use, it's quite a big stock of technology. But there's actually somebody here based in the UK, Oscar Pearson, who said, you know what, I'd love to find a way to use a better radio to make this smaller for my wife. And so because of his work, we've been able to downsize to what we call the Edison Explorer rig, which is what's on the top right with an American chapstick for size context. And we've also been developing other technology because people said, you know, it'd be nice to not have to use a phone to see what's happening on the rig, online or off. So we built these Explorer hats, which is what's pictured below, and I've got one here if you want to see. This one comes with a unicorn, because why not? And you can actually see what's happening on the rig. So it doesn't matter if you're on a plane, or you're camping, or you're caving, or whatever, you're able to see what's going on and also command the system. So a couple things I want to emphasize about the benefits of DIY. Obviously DIY, closed looping, is not right for everybody, but some of the opportunities that come out of doing DIY is the flexibility. You want to use this CGM and that pump, great. You want to be able to adjust the target, great. You want to set your target different than what somebody else thinks you should set, great, you get to do that. You get to monitor from the device of your choice. With Open APS, you can use any phone you want. So if you're an iPhone diehard or an Android diehard or whatever, you can use that. You want an Apple Watch, you want a Pebble Watch, you can use that. And this project is constantly moving. The system I'm using today, both hardware and software, is very, very different than what I used 3 years ago. And I think Kev said it well, if you want to do something different, do it, and then give it back to the community. It's very much scratch your own itch. The only thing that's stopping you from doing something is yourself. And maybe you don't know how, but ask for help. Say, I want to figure out how to do this, because that's how we all made this stuff happen. There's no experts in artificial pancreas out in the open source community. We all developed expertise by doing and spending a lot of time on it. So it's no surprise, hopefully, that a lot of people are doing this because they get good outcomes. They get to sleep. Their loved ones get to sleep. They get to spend more time doing whatever they want to do. They get to see their data from different devices. And also, it's not just A1C, but it's time and range, time spent feeling better. And I want to emphasize this because I've been able to shift from having a traditional hybrid closed loop system to actually be able to go to not having to bolus for my meals for more than 6 months. That's both thanks to some faster insulin that's been made available to me, but also changes in the algorithm and our understanding of the technology and what it can and cannot do. How great would it be to take one more thing out of our diabetes routine and get the same or better outcomes without taking out some of that human error, which was, for me, still, even 3 years closed looping, was my biggest source of post-meal lows, was because I overdosed, essentially, because I didn't know that I was going to walk home from dinner, and my insulin would whoosh. Now that the system is ramping up as needed and watching everything for me, I don't have to worry about that, and it's pretty awesome. And so because of all these changes and the sophistication of algorithms and features that we have, it makes me really frustrated when people say, yeah, but you're not an engineer. You're not a doctor. What do you know? Well, I'm here to tell you that people with diabetes know a lot more than the healthcare industry gives us credit for. And I think it's time for us to work together and figure out how to leverage the best of both worlds. Because the reality is the traditional innovation pipeline says, well, we'll get a product out to you in 5 years because there's no way we can sell you the frame of a car, even if you as an individual can use it. We're going to be selling cars. They don't understand that a car is a solution to the problem of how do I get from point A to point B faster? And we as patients go, you know what? I don't know how to build a car, but you know what? Here's a block of wood and some wheels. So I'm going to make a skateboard. because that's at least better than nothing. It's better than suffering, better than worrying. And over time, somebody will show up and say, hey, I can add steering, let's make a scooter. And it evolves into a bike and a motorbike, and we may end up with a car or an artificial pancreas faster than anybody would have expected. And that is the beauty of having patients involved in design and iteration and doing this stuff. We can think differently, we can think creative. No, it's not apples to apples because we're not held to regulations. However, that doesn't mean that traditional companies can't take advantage. The beauty of this open source stuff is that everybody can use it. It's licensed so that anybody in this room as an individual could use it right now. But also, any researcher can use it. Any company can use it. So the question to the industry, and I challenge you to ask them, is why aren't you using what's been developed and tested by the community? How could you use it to help make your product better, to go farther, to go faster? And I'm just going to close with one of my favorite stories that just blew me away, because when I did this, when I developed DIYPS and OpenAPS, it was all about feeling safe to sleep at night. That was my goal, was to sleep safe, and then a lot of other benefits came out of it. But somebody posted on Facebook a couple months ago with this picture and said that he had been going to the doctor to monitor the swelling in his eyes. And the doctor walked in and showed these pictures and said, what have you been doing? And this person's like, well, not much different, but I did build this OpenAPS thing that I found on the internet. And the doctor's like, well, you know, the picture on the left was your eyeballs from 3 months ago. The picture on the right is eyeballs from now. And the decrease in the red shows there's a decrease in swelling. And so there are so many benefits of this technology that we don't even know about yet. There's nothing we can claim that this stuff does. It may not be right for everybody, but it's great for me, it's great for a lot of people, and I'm very, very passionate about saying waiting is now a choice. We now have the ability to move forward with technology, and it's up to you. But I think if we collaborate together as a community of patients, with researchers, with healthcare industry, with companies, we can all make better technology available more widely to people. Thank you.
So next up we have Jem, who's going to speak to you about Android APS, which is the implementation of what Dana has just spoken about on an Android phone running with a different type of pump. And there's quite a lot of interesting information in this one. You may want to listen very carefully.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a bit hard to follow after Dana. I'm just a normal person. I know you think you're very normal, but you're amazing. I'm your average person with diabetes. I'm definitely not a coder. I'm a mother of a toddler and I work in local government. I know nothing about computers. I use a phone, I use a computer, but that's about it. So my contribution to Android APS has been working on the wiki or the user guide, because if I can follow the instructions and do it, then anybody can. So my journey in diabetes started in 1985, and we didn't actually test blood then. We used urine sticks. I was the first kid in my class to get a watch, not because I needed to tell the time, but because I needed to follow the second hand to know when to look at the colour on the strip. My mum then said, oh, in about 10 years you'll be able to read your blood glucose on your watch. Didn't quite happen. 1988 we started testing blood regularly. My HbA was in the 8s and 9s, probably the higher end, didn't really keep track, wasn't too sure what to do with it, just carried on. 2012 I finally got sent on the Daphne course and taught how to carb count, and I couldn't believe that hadn't been done sooner. My HbA got down into the 7s, which was good, but not good enough for me. I moved on to a pump in 2013, and my HbA improved, but it was still in the 7s. I nervously started using CGM. I was really scared of the cost of it, and I was very grateful to my parents who offered to fund it, and they still do, and I couldn't do it without them. I started off with the Libra and then moved quickly onto Dexcom because I wanted my data in real time. I started using Libra in January. By February, I found on Facebook Night Scout, and I got data on my watch. Only about 10 years later than my mum said, but I got data on my watch. I found out also through Facebook about this thing called looping. I'd read about it, and Tim has written a blog on it that introduced me to the concept, and I thought, I won't be able to do that. I don't have the tech, I don't have the skills, but maybe I'll look into it a bit more. And I found out that you can do open looping. You can get the system to tell you what it thinks you need to do, and you tell your pump to do it. As you can see there, I would never have thought of reducing my basal when I was 6.7, because to me 6.7 seemed fine. But actually, it knew that I was likely to drop later and that that reduction was needed. And I realised that there was a pump available which had warranties. I didn't have to go through sourcing an old pump. I didn't have to go through buying consumables that my team wasn't supporting. I could get a brand new pump available in the UK, and I could close the loop myself. And in July last year, I managed to get a Dana R, and it's been absolutely revolutionary. I closed the loop. I've got my pump, my phone, and my watch, and it does it all for me. You can see the lines are much better. I wouldn't have got here if it wasn't for Night Scout and WeAreNotWaiting. People sharing has made so much of a difference. Everything ramped up the last few years. Nothing happened down that end. People talking, things happening, people challenging. Brilliant. So my Android APS setup, I've got my phone that runs the Android APS. It also runs my CGM, gets the data. I've got my pump, and that's talked to by the phone through Bluetooth. And then I've got my watch, which is optional. I can use it to control the pump. I can give myself bolus. I can also use it to watch what's happening to my blood sugars and see how much insulin I've got in my system. How to do it yourself is actually surprisingly simple. I'm not a coder, as I said. I don't do computers. But there's just a few steps you need to follow. There's a user guide. Go through it step by step. If you've got a decent computer, and if you understand a bit about coding, you can get it done in less than 20 minutes. If you've got a slower computer, and you're not too sure what you're doing, but you follow the steps, and you ask online if you get help, and someone replies pretty quickly, it'll take you about 2 to 3 hours. So this is what my APS system looks like on my phone. We've got the display of the data, what my blood's doing, what it thinks it will be doing, what insulin is in my system, how much extra it's given me. At that point in time, I was on 0% basal, and this is notifying the changes in deviation. I've got the chance to change my target, so if I'm going to do any exercise, I raise my target up. If I'm about to eat, then I'm lowering my target down. You've got the option of the bolus wizard, and that will take into account not just your blood sugar and how many carbs you've already got on board, how much insulin you've got on board, but it splits the insulin into your basal and your bolus. Basal and bolus. So it's taking into account all of these extra changes earlier. So you can be correcting high, and you don't need to worry that you're going to overdose. You're not going to be stacking your insulin because it's all in there. It knows that it's all in there. And it's also tracking your trends. If you're still raising and you've had a lot of insulin, you know that you're still going to need a lot more, or the other way around. It's also a way for me to track all my other parts of data. I know how old my sensors are. I know when I did a last cannula change. It will alarm me when I need to do another cannula change so that I don't end up with a duff cannula. And it all sends that up to the cloud for me, but it hosts it on my phone as well. And if it's doing something that I'm thinking, hang on, why is it giving me that much insulin right now? I can go in and I can read the details of the decisions it's made based on code. And it might look a bit complex, but once you've read through the documentation, it's really quite simple. So valuable features for me, I've mentioned temporary targets a bit. You can change your targets depending on what you're doing. Having a toddler means that I quite often have stress spikes when he has a tantrum in the middle of the supermarket. I can put temp target on, I can avoid that stress spike, it's amazing. The control from the watch is brilliant. I can go to a meeting at work, I've not taken anything with me, biscuits come out. On my watch, I just give my insulin dose, no one knows any different. The circadian percentage profile, I didn't show on the earlier bit, but you can change all of your settings by a particular percentage, or also by time if you're either doing shift work or travelling on holiday on time. And for me, with my monthly hormone cycles, this has been amazing. I was adjusting my basals by about 30% each way previously, but I wasn't actually adjusting any of my other insulin doses. The circadian percentage profile adjusts everything by the percentage you tell it to, And so now I'm only knocking everything up 10%, and that's all I need to do. It changes it. The offline capability, my offline adventures are nowhere near as exciting as Alasdair's is going to tell you about, but I live in rural Somerset, so I need to know that it works if I don't have data, and it does. It all works on the phone. And the flexibility and individuality, it's what I want it to be. I can pick and choose. There are so many options out there. I can choose them to work for me. I love being able to pick from such a big menu. So does it work? Does it help? So this is 3 months before I started looping. It looks pretty good. HbA was 6%, my average blood glucose was 6.9, and I had a standard deviation of 3.2. And then I started looping. It was a stressful few months. My husband was in hospital, we started building an extension, there was lots of other stuff going on, and that's my 3 months after looping. The HbA was down to 5.4%, my average blood glucose was 6, but my standard deviation had lowered to 1.9. My hypo value, my median hypo value is 3.3, which is barely hypo. If I do have to treat a hypo, I only need 2 or 4 grams of glucose. It's made a significant difference to my diabetes. But it's not a cure for diabetes. I still have the disease, I still need to take control of it, I still need to know what's going on. It's not a self-reliant system, it's as strong as its weakest link, and the weakest link is the CGM. There's bits in the code that help smooth dodgy readings, but if your sensor's really bad, it's not going to help. But what does it enable? For me, it gives me confidence. I can go into a 3-hour work meeting and I just take my phone and my pump. I don't need anything else. I know that if I'm level before I go in, I'll be level when I come out. If I'm trending up or down, I know it will do what it needs to do to keep me fine. Before, I was having to take my blood test kit, I was having to take glucose, maybe a snack. Just wasn't so fun. I said I was a mother. It gives me the ability to be in the moment. I'm not having to say to my little boy whilst I chase him, oh, hang on, mummy's just got to do a bit of medicine. I choose when I look at my diabetes. My diabetes doesn't choose when I look at it. And that people have often been quite pedantic about being people with diabetes rather than a diabetic, and I've not really agreed with that because my diabetes did always come first. It doesn't anymore. I am a person.
So next up, Alasdair is going to talk to you about extreme offline with one of these systems, or all of them, depending upon,
or some of them, depending on what day of the week it is. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start with the obligatory about me. So, I'm 43. I'm 30 years and 13 days since diagnosis. I've had a great time where I've been able to work in all parts of the world, and I've done that while I've been fully type 1 diabetic, China, the States, Germany, Singapore. But I also got into some really interesting hobbies. Offshore yachting, or yacht racing, skiing, motorcycling and mountaineering, and that produces lots of challenges as a type 1. I must admit, this picture here is rounding Fastnet Rock in the Rock Fastnet race in 2015. I wasn't using a loop at that point, but I was using a Libre. I suspect I'm probably the first person using a Libre at that point, going around Fastnet. However, offline, Tim asked me to talk about offline. What does it really mean? Well, the dictionary says it's something that's not controlled by a computer or the internet. So let's assume for today we're talking about something that you don't need to talk to the internet on. We've talked about 2 of the 3 main loop systems available today. We haven't really talked about loop. I'm an iOS person, so I started playing around with loop as my first system. You have an iPhone, you have a small transmitter that effectively converts Bluetooth to a radio frequency, and that talks to an electronic pump. Dana's already talked about OpenAPS. Gemma's already talked about Android APS. I think the big thing to note are the differences in pumps. A lot of this started out in the US around Medtronic pumps. You're seeing with Android APS the ability to use the Dana R and RS. I've been using the combo now for the last 7 weeks, fully using Android APS. Also, the Insight is in the pipeline. Might be a little bit further down the track, but it's coming. And Loop, they're just about getting work done to start the current Omnipod using Loop. So that's just an overview of it. Really, it comes to three main things. What's your user interface? What's the computer that the algorithm people talk about is running on? What POPs can you use? If you're looking for choices, that's your big things to choose on. I haven't said anything about CGM because pretty much you can use any CGM dependently. So what do you need to work offline? Well, the picture that Dana puts up was quite simple. It showed a CGM, it showed a computer, it showed a POP. You need to have the ability to have all those things to talk to each other completely independently of internet. Not talking to the outside world. So whilst Kev's talked about Night Scout, that's great, but it only gets the figures actually when I come back into somewhere I have internet and the ability to use it. But that brings its own challenges. You've got to have a simple way of interacting with the system to set those temporary targets, or to actually look at data, or to see the results. And really, if you're somewhere like this, you want to have a minimum requirement for power, because it's not so easy to get to a USB outlet to charge up a phone, a Riley Link, a CGM receiver, or anything else you're carrying at the time. Low power requirements are the key aspect of this. So, I have used each of them offline, so let's just have a quick gander. Each of them has pros and cons. I'm quite happy to be up in the questions and answers afterwards. For me, Loop is really, really simple. Dexcom G5 quite happily talks to the iPhone. Loop talks to the Riley Link, which is attached to the iPhone. Quite happily live all day like that. To be fair, when I've been sailing, I carry 2 Riley Links just so I know I've got power for long enough. And just carry on using the iPhone. And the great thing is, you've got the Apple Watch as the main interface. It's probably worth saying why do I want to have that interface. When I'm offshore, I'm under 5 layers potentially of clothes. Trying to get to a pump, to fiddle around with a pump and play with the buttons isn't very easy. Can do it. Open APS. Pro, if you're going to use the Medtronic CGM, which we know isn't quite as accurate as the Dexcom, you can simplify offline use. The ability to read the Dexcom G5 direct onto the Open APS system is here. Still going through testing. Tim's using it. I've played with it a little bit. I know it works, but there's no simple user interface. At least it's not like sticking an iPhone or an Android screen in front of you, so it's not quite as easy to use. And James already talked about Android APS. I think so far for me, I've not found a con with it, but it gives me lots of devices to carry. And again, you can talk about using the watch to enter data. So each system, they're all great. They all have the ability to do stuff. They all give you the ability to work offline. So it's really courses for courses and what do you want to use. Do I trust each of them? Absolutely I do. I'm not worrying about what a regulator would say. What would I want in the future though? I just want a single device. I want the ability to use any CGM and any pump combination. And actually I want the ability to use different ones depending on what I'm doing. Talked about low power requirements. I do want it to have enough memory so it does when it does get to internet, I want to be able to update the Night Scout so I can actually have one consistent place to keep my data in. That was all I was going to say. So that was a really quick swoop through offline.
Thanks, Alasdair. So next up we have Matt, and he's going to speak to you about a slightly different topic. As another parent of a child with diabetes and a parent of a child that uses the 640G pump, he has a very interesting insight into some of the things that have been going on and his involvement in making that data available in the WeAreNotWaiting environment.
Thank you very much, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is my personal journey. We've got lots of machines coming our way, but it's about one little kid and a community with a huge heart. And at the centre of this journey, as a digital health consumer and as a contributor back into the process, is People Drive Digital, as championed by Anne Cooper. As carers, as people living with diabetes, we don't have all the skills, we certainly don't have all the clinical know-how, but we have an insight. We know about the day-to-day challenges and the problems more than perhaps anyone else. And I feel the WeAreNotWaiting community puts that at the very centre of everything we do, and that's more than a focus group. So just in case anyone's starting to Google, yes, I work in the NHS, I'm a consultant scientist, but today it's just coming from me. It's not me representing my trust or anything like that. This is, I have to say that. This is what it's all about. This is my daughter Janki. She's 6 years old. This unfortunately was the end of Janki's first day at preschool, age 3 in 2014. And Janki and her doll went on to multiple daily injections. Every sticker is a jab there for a couple of weeks. And as soon as we could at the beginning of 2015, we moved over onto the 640G pump. She loves her pump, has a name. She's very attached to it in every way. The CGM on the pump has proven to be an absolute game changer for us. It's really transformed how we've managed to manage her diabetes and her life generally over the last few years. That display is only very visible on the front of the pump. It's only on the front of the pump. So when you've got a little one running around with their friends, what can I see when they're out playing? Nothing. What can I see, or what could I see when she's at school? Absolutely zilch. At night time, I've got to keep my ears open. I've listened to Spotify for years, literally with one headphone on, because I'm listening out on the other ear for an alarm. And to be told, as a digital consumer generally, to be told there isn't an app for that was actually quite a shock back in 2015. Well, Night Scout, as we've seen from Kev's slides, was up and running at this point, so what about Night Scout? Could we do it with Night Scout? Well, unfortunately, Medtronic had made some tweaks between the generations of pump, and those eagle eyes, but those owl eyes could not get onto the 640G when we had it, certainly. So let me take you on a journey of stepping the 640 into the cloud. So the first thing I did was really try and take a pause, take a breath, and look at what we really needed as individuals here as parents. What I really wanted to do was to have the ability to know when the pump was alarming, and crucially when those alarms kept on going off. So we had instances at school where she'd just be in the corner of the playground, no one paying attention to her, and she wasn't wanting to pay attention to the pump alarm when she was hyper. So the thing would just be blasting away its alarm and no one was responding. I wanted to know that as a parent, so I didn't want to go through that again. I didn't want her to go through it again. So the first thing I did was to put a small microphone into the pump pouch, route that round to a small Android phone that sat around the back here. We run an app called OtterSense, which was designed for people who can't hear to know that there's a smoke alarm or a fire alarm going off, for example. And basically trained that app to pick up not just the pump is alarming, but what type of alarm is it. The Medtronic does give slightly different alarm tones, and we were able to then basically push that up to the cloud, and I get a remote alarm on my wrist here to say the pump had alarmed, and that was the second alarm, third alarm, and so on. I really wanted those numbers, not just because I'm a stubborn so-and-so, but because I actually getting early track of things moving up or down would hopefully give us some better control. And using some code that Ben West had put together for the previous generation of Medtronic pump, I managed to cobble together something that did actually work on the 600 series. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Proved that we could do it. And what we're able to get, this is all real-time data, so this was everything from the pump, not just the CGM data, insulin, carb, everything coming over real-time, smart guard triggering on and off. And that was an absolute game changer for us. Put it out onto the internet, and within a couple of months we had around about 150 people up and running on that solution. Got some help from another T1 dad, Tom Collins, to make things a little bit more slick. Say 600, 640 and 670 pumps around the world up and running on that system. Then a Goodhart came along, and is a developer over in Australia who reworked the uploader, the 600 series solution into what we're using now and what some of you in the audience may be using today. Some much slicker, much more reliable process than we have with my Heath Robinson setup. And we basically have the glucose meter attached to an Android phone, download the app, and pretty locally you're up and running straight away. A few more minutes work together up into the cloud. But as a secondary display, you can be up and running literally within minutes. But I know, And all of us in this, or most of us in this room, will know that actually having that secondary display doesn't take us off this glucose roller coaster. We're still living with those highs and lows, and there's still risk associated with every one of those highs and lows. Now, by trade, I'm a nuclear physicist, so I'm used to dealing with risks. And I took some time to sit down and actually work out, take a pause and actually think, well, for my daughter right now, what is the least riskiest thing to do? Do we carry on? I can't take away the type 1 diabetes, but I can control the technology that to a certain extent, that I can give her access to. And I took the decision that we would go on to OpenAPS. So we use OpenAPS overnight, and we use it some days. We don't use it at school because that would just blow their minds at the moment at school. We're taking little baby steps at school. But as Dana's shown already, OpenAPS at its heart is 270 lines of code. And I don't want to belittle the fact of what it's doing in terms of taking control of basal on your pump, but it is inherently safe in doing that, in my opinion. That's just my personal opinion and the decision that I've come to for my daughter. And it's short enough that I can actually sit there and read it line by line. And I know it sounds a little bit geeky. Yes, I do have a Geeks t-shirt on, but this is what it's about. I can step through that code and I can reassure myself that yes, this is the lowest risk option for my daughter right now. And that's the decision we've taken. And I can't tell you as a family how nice it is to wake up every morning, not just between 4 and 10, but on the money, on target, virtually every morning on OpenAPS. That is an absolute game changer for us. So my journey hasn't stopped there. A few weeks ago, I was over in Cardiff at an NHS Hack Day. So we looked at putting together night scout data from across the clinic, putting into a common standard, so something the NHS is used to dealing with, HL7 standard, basically presenting up a dashboard for a clinical team, helping, we hope, clinicians to reconnect with their patients' data, and so through that with their patients themselves, and sort of closing that loop, that clinical loop. So this little girl has a life to live, and it's my responsibility, I feel, as a parent, to help her do that as safely as I possibly can, starting right now. And I hope you'll join us on that journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So the final session in this group of presentations is from me, talking about the data and the research that potentially this data can provide. We called it diabetes telemetry, from instrumentation to information. Of course, telemetry is a term that probably most of us are familiar with. It's the process of recording and transmitting the readings of an instrument, usually remotely. In terms of medical telemetry, that's from within the body to outside of the body. And what we know is that instrumentation and decisions create data. So whether that's a car, whether that's a human, whether that's an artificial pancreas system, there's a lot of data, a lot of decisions, a lot of instrumentation. Now, much like a Formula One car, humans are very finely tuned instruments. Not like a Formula One car, we don't come with built-in instrumentation. So for me to find out what my glucose level is, I have to go and do a finger prick or wear a Dexcom. And in fact, if I want to know even more about what my body is doing at a point in time, I need to take a bunch of data off a pump and off the Dexcom that I'm wearing, and then interpret that data to decide what else is going on in my body, like is my insulin sensitivity changing? Do my carb ratios change? What other things are going on? And if we look at Formula One, this isn't the diabetes slide. If we look at the Formula One telemetry, we can see that in real time, Formula One cars driving around that track really fast, they know what the throttle's doing, what the brake's doing, how long the tyres have got left to last, how fast they're going around the track, what the driver's heart rate is. Huge amount of information that's available to see what's going on now, but also that's available for post-event diagnostics to determine why did something go wrong or could we do better. Artificial pancreas systems have similar capabilities. You've got F1-like data available to you. What do I mean? If I show you that, you've got the real-time data, the night scout traces that we've all been showing. Again, not quite such a flat line in that image, but it's not too bad. But then we've also got the post-event diagnostics. And what night scout doesn't necessarily show you is the derived data that we generate from all of this stuff. So, during the course of the day, OpenAPS calculates my insulin sensitivity and adjusts what's going on in terms of how it adjusts my basal rates and what carb ratios to use when I tell it I'm eating in order to better fit and better manage what's going on. It also has other factors like blood glucose impact and deviation that it uses to determine what it's going to do next. So if we're creating all this data, it gives us a massive opportunity to do something that people haven't done before because they simply didn't have the data. It gives us the opportunity to do a bit of research, pulling big data and actually finding things out that, well, how many people in the room would know how their insulin sensitivity changes on an hour-by-hour basis through the day? People who've got loops, I see. I did a few N=1 experiments where I captured my daily carb, or my carb ratio based on the auto-tune algorithm that runs as part of OpenAPS. And my sensitivity I captured on a 15-minute basis over the course of a week. What you can see from these is that things go up and down. In fact, what was quite interesting was my carb ratio using auto-tune appeared to drop off towards the end of the week as my sleep got less throughout the week and then recovered over the weekend. I might have noticed this in a normal model, but it's quite difficult to determine. So if you've got all of this data and you're capturing it, storing it, and we are able to derive it from the data that we've captured in Night Scout already, what can you do with it? Well, you can take it across everybody who's using something like this. So Dana mentioned 576 plus people looping. I think that's not as many as we have. I think there's well over 1,000 people based on what we see on the internet. And what has been set up is the openhumans.org community allows us to transfer all of this data anonymously into a place where anybody can access it and can then use it to do big data research. Now, we've heard about big data before because Medtronic talk about it all the time. In fact, what probably not a lot of people here know is that Medtronic have used big data to develop 711 avatars of people with a circadian insulin sensitivity profile based on the 670G data they've captured on their trials. Now, I can't comment on what the data looks like. I can't comment on the quality of the data. I have no idea what those things look like because, well, Medtronic have never shared it with us. That would be the people whose data that they had used to do that. This comes back to the question of whose data is it really? In this context, it's ours. It's anonymized and everybody has access to it. So what can we do with this data if we start to look at it? One of the things that we've already started a project on is look at how insulin sensitivity varies. We have some data scientists taking the data that we can pull from Night Scout, running some modified code from OpenAPS, and then develop circadian rhythms for ISF and also event-based ISF changes, and with a view to looking at that more into the future, how sickness affects the sensitivity changes and how other factors affect sensitivity changes. How do carb ratios change? Indicators of when change might happen that you weren't expecting. What all of these things do for the community is they give us a set of data that you can then use to interpret, and you can share with healthcare professionals, we can share it on the internet as part of the various different communities we're involved with. That makes living with diabetes easier. We can say with a sense of certainty that if you do certain things in exercise, this is what it's going to look like, and we've got the data that backs this up. We can do the same thing for example, women's monthly cycles. If we've got that data, caught it, and then we can see what the variation looks like across a population, all of a sudden the advice that's being presented is a much better set of data than simply, well, it's an anecdotal feeling. And that's why we are encouraging people who are using the various looping systems out there to upload their data to Open Humans. There's a team there, and the research that Dana's involved with allows us to get the resources to do this work and to understand far more of what's going on with our bodies at points in time through our lives, and share that information with people to make living with diabetes easier. So I'm going to leave you with this final slide. We are not waiting because we want a better life for ourselves and our loved ones. That's what it comes down to. The technology and skills are available here and now, and you can access them easily. And the final bullet, the simple, most important point of this whole thing. We're not waiting because we don't have to.
So guys, do you want to come back on the stage and we'll do a Q&A? So I'll open up to the audience, but if I can just be cheeky and take the host prerogative and start with a question. One of the biggest barriers to this, a lot of the organisations and people in the room will be more than conscious of the barriers just to getting an insulin pump, standard insulin pump, through the NHS. And that's obviously a precursor to this system. What I couldn't help but wonder through the presentation, would this system in many ways, is it a prerequisite that you have long experience using insulin pumps? Or in some ways it strikes me as a safer system than a standalone insulin pump. Therefore, is there a potential leapfrogging that could take place?
It's a great question. We have a lot of people who have expressed interest in going straight from MDI injections to looping and skipping over the basics of pumping. There have been people who have done that, but in general, most people find that they want at least a couple of days or a week on a standard insulin pump just so they understand the basics of how it works, because those fundamentals make it easier to be successful with the DIY closed loop because it's built off of standard pumping. So it can be done, and I think in the future, there are definitely going to be paths forward to going from MDI to closed looping, whether that's DIY or commercial. But I think that's something to be cognizant of right now in DIY. I think it's a little bit safer to make sure you understand the basics so you're on the same page with everybody else who's switching into DIY closed loop.
Thank you. Just to add to that, I think a few people raised the issue of confidence earlier in technology, and certainly for us, I'm only talking N=1 here, but for us, having a year on a conventional pump and really understanding what was kind of felt right and what didn't feel right, gave us the confidence to go for APS.
Okay, I'll open to the floor. So first question on the front row.
I actually have two questions. The first one is, how does this closed looping affect product warranty for the pump or for the CGM? Because you're kind of overriding their program. And the second question has got to do with travel. Because, like a lot of diabetics are kind of traveling a lot these days, and they're crossing and they're having issues with jet lag, and this is my predominant issue with jet lag. Are you guys looking at how, I guess, jet lag affects insulin sensitivity and basal rates and stuff like that? And also, how exactly do you travel with that fake bomb?
Okay, let me take the first one and the last one, because I can do those. Travelling with a fake bomb, no issue at all. I remember the first time I actually travelled with an insulin pump, because you're carrying a bomb, a circuit, and an unidentified fluid through security. I've never had an issue in thousands of flights doing that, so I'm not fussed about that one. Product warranty. There is one of the loop systems that you can get today that actually allows you to have a warranty to pump. And that's the Android APS, because you can have either the Dana R, the RS, and I guess the combo and the Insight, I'm looking for a nod from the back of the room, are still sold by Roche. So that gives you 4 potential pumps to go at. The Medtronic ones tend to be out of warranty these days, or really hard to get a warranted one. So my experience was my healthcare providers were much more comfortable if I had a warranty to pump. So I think you'll see now the move to try to get more warranty pumps that work will make people more comfortable. I'm going to leave the second one on travelling though to Dana.
So the question about the comment about are we overriding the pumps? The reality is we are interacting with our pumps the same way. We're just doing it every 5 minutes automatically. And that's actually by design the way these pumps were designed, and we're just really taking advantage of those features. Travel's never been a concern, but it's a very, like the first question everybody asks, that's why if you follow me on Twitter and you're like, gosh, she travels a lot and we should stop tweeting pictures going through security. I keep doing that because of the concern, because it's a real concern. But the reality is these are small computers, just like your phone. They can go through the x-ray, they're just fine. So that's not a concern. In regards to jet lag, with my 29 hours awake, usually when I lose sleep, I get insulin resistant. But for some reason, when I went to sleep, I actually became more sensitive. Don't know why, but because of the auto sensitivity feature we have built into OpenAPS, it actually does a running average of my sensitivity over time. So as I went from normal to sensitive, it automatically adjusted my dosing for me. So it didn't matter that I was 30% sensitive all night long, it's able to automatically adjust it. And now everybody's different and every situation is different, but that's one of the nice things about having built these features in over time, is it requires less human interaction, and I just have to do the basics, and everything else, all the fuzzy details of did you get it exactly right or are you close to right, the system can pretty much pick it up. But that's why I think it's important to talk, as we evaluate either DIY systems or commercial systems, is to really look at the algorithm and the features, because they're not apples to apples. A DIY closed loop of one kind is not the exact same as the other. There's obviously pros and cons to everything, but I think talking about the algorithm is important for this reason, and it's something that I want the community to challenge the manufacturers on, because selling a commercial closed loop, this black box and that black box don't necessarily do the same thing, and we need more details to be able to answer questions like that and be able to pick the ones that will work the best for our lifestyles.
Just on the topic of security from a UK perspective, I would say, based on flying with the loops that I've done, I have more problems with getting the pump through security than I've had with any of the loop rigs.
Okay, before we take any more questions, can we properly explain Anne? Because I'm quite conscious that Anne is in the audience, for those of you who don't know Anne. If you, then that means you're not on social media, clearly. Anne is a person with type 1 diabetes, and she also is the chief nurse for NHS Digital. So I think it's quite important we have that perspective, because they will have a lot of role to play in data, etc. I'm sure you will have some questions which may be relevant, which you may be able to answer or not. But I'm quite keen that we get Anne on the stage as well. And while we're doing that, Tim, I need your help to sort this out for me, because I've been trying here in the background. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, Lucy? Go for it.
I was actually wondering what your aims for the future are, you know, with the actual technology itself, but also for the community and how you're going to make it more available to more people in more countries.
I think one of the biggest answers is pumps, and having more accessible pumps that are more in warranty. I know that's a big concern to a lot of people. I think you already answered that question fairly well, but I think that's a challenge to the manufacturers to say, we want this. I would love to be able to pick my best pump, my best CGM, and the best algorithm. And for that algorithm, it may be DIY or it may be commercial, but I'd love to have the ability to pick and choose each of those features and not have to pull a full stack. So I think that's one of the things that the community does well, is kind of setting the bar for what we expect and what is possible. You can compare the results. We've published some studies from the community and our data, and you can compare our results to the other in-trial devices and the one that is available on the market. But I think it really comes down to having the pump be available in different countries, and also to have healthcare providers not raise fear, uncertainty, and doubt just because they've not heard of it before. I think that's something healthcare providers, and you can probably speak to this, but I think this technology is just the first of many. We all have amazing technology capabilities in our pockets. It's not just going to be OpenAPS or Extra or Night Scout that we're going to come in with. In the future, there will be other stuff. And healthcare providers need to be able to deal with the unknown. And I think that's going to be an important part of allowing this technology to spread, is not having patients get shut down or be afraid to talk to their healthcare provider about what they're using, or choose not to say anything.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the problem with some of this is I think we all take a very singular view of a particular problem, and I think in this particular case everybody has a part to play in what's going on. So the system has a part to play, the providers have a part to play, the community have a part to play. The bit that encourages me is that years ago, when I was first qualified as a nurse, or it was around the same time that I was diagnosed as having type 1, ironically, patients or people, parents, didn't have a role to play in any of this. And I think what's going on currently is the system's struggling a little bit with the idea that we've got the rise of the people, as I would call it, and power coming from citizens. And I think that's what's going on. But I think that doesn't mean that this is the only thing that's right. It means that we want good quality technology that's warranted. We do. So I think that's part of what's going on, that we've got this evolution going on of where power is in the system. And that's why I think it's really important that peer networks and this community continue to develop.
I'd like to ask you advice if I can. I mean, I'm somebody I would absolutely love to try closed looping. I was a patient in Dr. Walker's trial in Cambridge a year or two ago in their closed loop trial, and it was very frustrating to give that kit back at the end. The situation I'm in now, I have an Omnipod. I know there is some progress with the Omnipod control, but it's not there yet. I've got 3.5 years of warranty left to go. What would you do if you were in my position and you needed a pump? Is it a case of saying you find money and you buy a Dana pump? Is it a case of saying I know that getting an alternative pump from the clinic isn't an option because of the warranty with the NHS?
So I've done this where I swapped onto a Medtronic pump and my clinic were happy to support me at the time. They actually phoned me a Medtronic that had a year's worth of warranty left on it, because they had it sitting on the shelf. I know of other people who have gone and bought a Dana R or RS, and their clinic has then happily swapped the consumables they're paying for. So there are options that are out there. I guess it's a conversation with your clinic and how well does your healthcare provider stroke consultant get on with this sort of technology.
It's also worth bearing in mind that a lot of progress has been made on the current Omnipod setup. As it stands at the moment, as Alasdair talked about in his presentation, Loop has a thing called the Riley Link, which communicates between the iPhone and the Medtronic pump. Pete Schwamm, who's been working on addressing the firmware on that to work with Omnipod, and a fairly large group of people, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, are a long way through getting that protocol, not just getting the protocol understood, but also what the communication needs to look like and the messages that it needs to send. So given the size of the group and the interest in getting Omnipod working on that, I mean, this is purely a speculative guess, but I would imagine that within the next 6 months you would see something there.
I'd be a little cognizant of putting timelines on, just because you never know what can happen. And even to me, 6 months would be, I think, is a really long time to wait. So it's really up to you if you're looking for something secondhand that you want to tie yourself over to towards your ideal system and what you're willing to pay for that. Other places in the world, I know it's a little bit different with the NHS, but other places in the world you can buy the secondhand pump, you can buy supplies. It may not be funded, but you can get access to it. And so it's kind of your cost evaluation of what's your best short-term versus medium-term solution and what you're comfortable doing, and also which system you want.
Question from the back.
I'm just going to jump in.
Who's jumping in? Yes.
Stole the mic.
Jump in and then.
Opposite problem. My warranty's up in April, and I want to get a new pump to start looping. What pump should I go for?
We'll go back to what Dana just said. Which system is it that interests you most, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, it's both the combination of what pump do you want, what hardware or phone works for that, and what capabilities you need. Some people find that the Dana R or RS, it's very important to add these letters, people, because it gets very confusing for me when you talk about the Dana, please. So when we're talking about the Dana R, the Dana RS pumps that have Bluetooth capabilities, sometimes I find people who struggle with actually using the physical pump. Granted, you don't have to touch the pump a lot. There's a lot of things you can do for the phone, but I would say watch videos of people using the different pumps so that you can make an educated decision about what you really want to use as a pump and understand how often you would have to touch the pump or not. That might influence it.
I think, again, I've used the combo for 8 years before I flipped to a Vibe and then onto the Medtronic pumps. I like it, it works, and now that it's available at APS, it's one to look at. It's another choice.
So my question was maybe slightly controversial. There's a discussion about, as we move towards closed loop systems, about the hypo setting of 4 being the floor, not being a bit high. I was just wondering about whether any of you guys have a lower setting of go below 4 as acceptable limits.
So I'll be quite upfront, I set my target at 5. Because if you actually think about the percentage accuracy on your CGM, what are you actually going to be at? So I set it at 5, it'll wander down. I spend less than 3% of my time in hyper at less than 3.9, if I believe the stats.
From a parent's perspective, I set it at 4 on the end lights on the Medtronic if I'm having a good sensor. I'll leave it at 4, but I'll let it roll down to sort of 3.5 if I can avoid disturbing my daughter. It's just my personal perspective on that.
Are you asking about like the alarms or targets for these numbers?
So your lower limits you're aiming for. So
okay, so for targets.
Yeah.
So for target in OpenAPS we have hard coded, which is of 80 as the lowest that you can set your target, which I believe is something like 4.4-ish, depending on how you do the math. So you really can't set the target lower than that. You could absolutely go lower than that, but we don't allow you to set your target lower than that as a safety setting in the system. And so most people will do that or higher. It also depends. Some people will run a little bit below their target on average. Some people run higher. So depending on that, their lifestyle, their needs, people will adjust it a bit. And then based on that, they can use that to tune their outcomes of where they want to spend most of their time in range and if they have problems, where they want to improve from there.
As a physiological system being measured by something that's digital, it's not 100% mapped as accurate. So when I personally run a setting of 5 milliliter as my standard target, I'm happy if I'm looking at the predictions and they predict that it's not going to go below 3.5 to leave it to work, because generally there's still enough variance in what my body is doing for even the predictions not necessarily be 100%, but generally my experience of watching it is that if it's predicting that, I'm going to be fine.
Okay, got a question there?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I vary my targets based on what I'm doing. So I'm normally between 4.5 and 5, but when I'm driving, I raise that temporarily up to 5.5. So the temp targets is brilliant for allowing adjustment. But also I will quite happily see a prediction line go down to 3.5 because I know it will go down and it will come straight back up again because there's less insulin in my system. It's not a hypo for me now is not what a hypo was before.
Okay. How many questions do we have? Because I think I was quite keen to wrap it up. Because otherwise we do need to get home on a beautiful Saturday. I've got this young gentleman, please.
Question for Dana. So you said 6 months without manual bolus. Does that literally mean you'll eat a sandwich, a burger, and you don't have to do anything?
I will do carbonetry via my watch or my phone, but no bolus. And it's a very non-precise carb count. I do like 30 units, 30 carbs, 60 carbs, whatever. I make sure that it's communicated to my rig, and that's all I have to do.
Cool, thank you.
Just to add to that, I ran with the same configuration for 6 months last year. Unfortunately, I'm one of the people who's suffered with side effects from FIASP, so I can no longer do that. But when you are using a faster insulin, this stuff is absolutely possible.
And also, one more comment on that, there's people who are not on FIASP who have found to be able to do no bolus for certain small amounts of meals. It varies person to person. For some people, it's a 15 carb snack. For some people, it's a 30 or 40 carb meal. That's something where people get to experiment and find out what works for them. Is the potential variance in blood sugar with a no bolus better than the risk of a low and the behavior trade-off of not having to do something? So that's one of the things that I like about DIY is people will come in and ask, what is the best bolus strategy? It's like, well, it depends on what you're eating and what goes into it and what you want to do and the trade-offs. Because people will come in and say, I've been so high, I've been running high, and they'll post a graph of running flat at 130. And other people look at that and go, Okay, so everybody's diabetes is different and where they want to run is different. So it's important to put that in context and say, here's where I've been running, here's what I'm trying to achieve, and then we can talk about strategies to change the outcomes, and less about the judgments of how we feel like we're doing or where we want to be.
Okay, Anna's got a question. Trying to don't remind you that you said it's hard when it's like up. I'm trying Right. Okay, right.
My question is actually a question for Partha while he is.
Can you do that?
Thank you.
I'll answer this question.
So mine's a question for Partha, and I hope it's a question that some of you are thinking. Because certainly I feel like the odd one out on the stage at the moment. So my question for Partha is, this is a room full of people who have an interest and want to possibly do something around all of this stuff. How can we as individuals and a community, Partha, lobby, work with the system to get the best out of it? So how can that chap there who is interested in changing his pump get the best outcome? What can we productively do to do that?
Yeah, so I think the reason I organize these things is to actually find exactly the answer to that. There are the traditional routes of doing it via the charity, Diabetes UK, JDRF. Those of you know the works that I've done, whether it's TAD or doing a comic book or whatever it is, it has been done with the community. If you got some ideas, these we know the challenges. So if you look at today, which nicely rolls into what I'm going to say about, you've heard what is out there, right? Is it going to be for everybody in the room? No. But could it be an option for many people out there? Yes. So how do we do that? I'm open to suggestions. I'm not stuck in the, I would say there's only one way of doing things. We're very happy to experiment. We're very happy to try. Now that means involving working with the research community, or, as me and I have been discussing at length, over whether we look at the algorithms and do something different with it. And whether we say, so how many are in the room are healthcare professionals? May I ask, hands up please? Right. Hands down if you don't have diabetes. If you've got diabetes, put your hand down. If you don't have it, keep it up. Right. You've heard this, right? Forget about everybody else in the room for a second. What's your first reaction when you've seen all that?
Oh, I want it for all my
What is it inspired? What else?
I want it for all my patients.
What is for all your patients, right? Anthony, what do you think?
I want it for my patients.
Right.
I'm sitting here thinking, could I do this within the framework of the NHS?
Okay. Now let me ask you the question again. You work within the NHS. How many of your colleagues you work with day in, day out look at them and go like, Jesus Christ?
if I raise this, I think a lot of them would turn around and start raising.
That's the issue. We are in a room of a bubble. Motivated, that's what brought you. Why would you came here on a Saturday in London otherwise? Why would you? On a sunny day, because you want to know what's going out there. So our job is to try and convince the sort of system to try and play with that, which I'm very happy to do. So if you've got any suggestions as to how you'd like to take it forward, I think the algorithm suggestion, and I can promise you I'll be in touch with that regularly to discuss an industry. You have the industry in this room, all four of them together. There is a willingness, otherwise we wouldn't be having this day. It would just be you, Dana, and me. Right? The industry will come around and they are talking to us, so we'll explore it. And if you've got ideas, bring it. Very happy to take it to the next phase. Is it about improving the algorithm? Is it about talking to the companies about what they can and cannot give access to? Because we need to look at it at their side as well. Right? They need to compete to get to the next product as well. Now you may not like it. That's how you're going to get the next one. If they don't sell it, you're not going to get the next version either. So there is a happy medium of balance. Now I used to think I was a rebel, right? Dana makes me positively look like some sort of hermit. But what we need to do, systems will not change without the matters. We know that. You need to disrupt the system to make things happen. That is a prime example of that. Will this be more commonplace in 5 years' time? I hope so. So I think the question to answer to your question is, if you've got an idea, brilliant. I'm very happy to organize things here. I have got the connections and get the right people around the table. I can do that. I can get the regulatory bodies together. And I can say as a clinician, do you know what I like here? What can we do to make it happen? Now the answer may be we can't do it under the legal framework, then we look at it differently. And one very good example for that is DVLA and driving at the moment. So we are in heavy negotiation with the DPL about how do you change it without having to go through 5 different layers of legal bills being signed. It's not that we don't want to give people access to doing CGMs, to do their, it's about how do we get there. There are legal things that we can't just go and do it. So, the answer to your question is, if Dana wants to come back and engage with us on that project or anybody here, doors open, very easy to find me. Twitter, email, anything, everybody knows him, very easy to get hold of.
I would say the same thing applies to the community. If you as healthcare providers need data, we have studies, we have peer-reviewed journal articles that you can review. If there's something missing that you want to add to our next study or our next thing, tell us and we can do that. But we need that collaboration, we need that conversation. So our board is literally open online too, and we want to have this conversation with health organizations too.
Fantastic. Right, so final words for today. First of all, I'm going to say a big thank you and lots of thank you. I'm going to start with Ben, because Ben has been instrumental in saying, so when I came back from America and went like, this is a good idea, Ben went like, yeah, let's do it. I love people who say that, let's do it. I mean, it's probably not going to happen, but most things I try don't happen, but it's great. Ben went like, yeah, we'll do it, Parker. All right then. And then Tim said, let's do it. And I said, yeah, good, let's do it. And that's how it happened. But now we didn't do anything else, did we, apart from a lot of emails saying, let's just do it. So that's one. I think a big thank you to Ben, Tech UK, the support for doing this, because you'll be here in a room in the middle of London because of what they've provided us. Thank you, big thank you to Dana and everybody else for being there. And you've flown across from all the way from Seattle. Thank you for that. The companies, and I think I would say that, they have come here. They could have had the choice of saying we're not part of this. Regulation says we should not be, but they have. They've all been here taking questions. I think there's a big thank you for that. But I was just going to take a few final moments to say a few things. One, a shout out to 2 different things. One is Paul Walker in the audience, and he's doing a half marathon in Swansea with 101 people doing type 1 diabetes. Great world record stuff. I'm going to try and collect data on the impact of exercise on type 1 diabetes. If you find time, please contact him. Paul, put your hand up so everybody knows who the hell you are. There's Paul in the background if you find time. Talk to him. The other thing is that we are also in this room. We are in a very fortunate place. We're in the first world part of the country, of the world, first world country. We are talking about these sort of things. And there are people in the world who don't get insulin. So if you find time, there's a good campaign running called Spare a Rose, whereby you can even put some money towards people getting some access to insulin. I have come from a part of the world where I have worked where people with type 1 diabetes would simply die. It's as simple as that. There was no insulin. We only were allowed to use insulin 3 years out of date. Alright? That worked in this community. If you find time, a couple of dollars, and the website is in dollars, isn't it? Then please do contribute, because I think that's going to be a good initiative to do. I'm going to finish with, is the future here? We always say future. It's a bit too futuristic. 1969. Yeah? Remember that? Loved it. But you won't see this, but this is Captain Kirk on an iPad. There you go. The first big screen television in the history of time, cardiac monitor. The reason I'm putting these pictures up, Gene Roddenberry was known as the father of science fiction because of what he said. Now I'm not going to go to the swishy doors. Remember those? I would love to walk through those. We walk through them all the time. The future is what you make of it. Left and over with a Bluetooth. Star Trek has always shown the way. 1966, 1973 comes out. 1987, iPad. 2010, 1988, telehealth, Google Glass. Star Trek has been an important bit of our technology. The future is what you make of it. It does happen. I'm going to finish with this. Have you seen that movie? Not yet. So I'm going to introduce you to a particular bit which is in Black Panther, which is at the end. This is what it says, right? You can read it or read it for you. Wakanda, which is that imaginary place. We no longer watch from shadows. We cannot, we must not. More important, we'll know the truth more connected than separate to us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, but the foolish we have to build barriers. Right? We must find a way to look after one another and remember the one tribe. Now, I like that because if you want to change the paradigm of diabetes care, that has no revenue. That's part of the tribe. If you're doing something, it's not up to us to sort of say, how do we incorporate that in the system? Since you work hard. Yeah? Let's try it. So I think I would love to sort of leave that message from the NHS, from the healthcare professional. Yeah, there's a lot to learn, what to do, etc. But that's what we need to get to. You're not our enemies. You're not like somebody we are trying to sort of keep away from us. There's a reason you've taken up this job as healthcare professionals to do, because we in general we do care. Yeah? Yes, doctors and nurses do care. That's why we do this job. We're not doing this because it pays us a truckload of money. Trust me, we would have got paid more doing something else. But it's about being part of the same tribe. So I think that's the message I'll leave you with today. I include the companies in it, I include everybody in it. So if you want to change that, then it is actually wonderfully positioned to do it, because the access it gives you, it's not pick and choose based on the ability to pay. So I go back to the first thing I said this morning: is there too much money needed? Not really. There's enough money. It's about where we use the money and how we use it and how we think about it. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll say thank you to all of you. Safe at home, and it's been a great pleasure for holding the first one. We shall see what holds the future. Thank you very much.
And just before everybody heads out of the door, following this, we're going to go down to the Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese on Fleet Street. So if anybody wants to go for a quick drink, has any questions, wants to talk about any of the stuff that's come up today, that's the place to do it, because Ben unfortunately has to get the place ready for a conference on Monday.
Yeah. And it's nice because when you're doing this in your own little pocket of the world, a bunch of people think you're a nutter. It's nice to come here and be validated and actually, like, you know, I'm not trying to single-handedly kill my child.
I don't anticipate this up. I guess I'll Shall I click on question? No, I should stop it.
At least a